Okay, folks, I'll call our meeting to order. This is a meeting of the town council's committees, October 3rd, 2022. Councilor Wingard is not with us tonight. All the councilors are present. And the first committee is going to be Community Development Committee. And I will take that for Councilor Wingard, who is normally chair of that committee. The first item on this committee is request from Down East Down East Emergency Medicine Institute to purchase a portion of town-owned property located at 135 Kelly Road. Want to frame that for us?
Sure. We have representatives from DME here. But staff received a request from DME to see if we would entertain selling the organization about 2/3 of an acre off the public works lot. So that's the lot that includes 135 Kelly Road. As counselors are, I think, aware, only entity that can sell land or land rights in Orono, town-owned land rights are is the town council. So I have attempted to provide you some backup. You received a copy of their request. Staff went back to try to figure out if this was as final says possible, and it is possible to transfer ownership. It would take a revision to both our site plan with the planning board and our SLOTA permit, and the underground filtration system would create some issues that we would need to manage either through deed restriction or other agreement. So it's possible. Whether or not it's a good idea is something that only the town council can determine as you weigh the benefits to the requester and the needs of the town. Normally, when we do something like this, Tom, we would invite people to come. I don't have any staff people, so they could take the staff seat.
Happy to hear from representatives.
So we've got one there and one here.
Both sides. Good evening.
Good evening. Would you identify yourself for the record, please?
Well, my name is Vinyl Appleby. I'm a 37-year resident, not 37 years old, I wish. But I've been in town for 37 years. I'm a registered professional engineer for the state of Maine. And I once served on the Orono planning board. And Dr. Bowie, Robert Bowie, is with me this evening. He is co-founder with his twin brother Richard for the DME organization. And between us, we hope to be able to answer any questions you might have this evening. If you wouldn't mind, I do a brief presentation. I think you might like to hear why we're here, what our need is, what the way we see it, obviously. So a real brief intro to DME, if I might. You may not be familiar with Down East Emergency Medicine Institute, but we're an all volunteer organization with actually hundreds, correct me anything I say wrong. Been around since 1991. Our headquarters are in Orono. As a matter of fact, we've always been here. And we are, I mentioned we have hundreds of volunteers, comes and goes. We conduct search and rescue for people that are lost and missing persons. We have been successful in doing that. Sometimes not so successful, but we put the effort and the energy forward to do what we can. We have, I know DME, some of you may not be aware, DME has a number of assets in the emergency rescue type arena. DME, I know, donated a bunch of rescue equipment. Is this correct? A few years back to the
transition from a voluntary fire service or voluntary rescue squad to the town. We helped them do that transition with their equipment.
So Demi, I guess why I'm throwing all that out is because I want to show you that Demi does have a history and here in the town. I mentioned we have a lot of gear, personal rescue gear, personal protection, gear, safety equipment, all the like. And we have a need for storage. Okay, we bought a small lot, as you see in the information packet there that we submitted to town manager. Demi bought a small piece of land. It was some storage units that I guess I don't know whether they really serve their purpose or not, but it's a very small lot on 123 Kelly Road. We're abutted to the town public works garage, and on the other side, on the east side of us, it's a residential slash rental property. With all the assets that we have, that storage unit that we bought is not large enough. What we're currently doing, and excuse me, not current, well, currently we're in the transition from, had a long-term lease with the city of Bangor to store our equipment in an old hangar space down there, and that lease has come to an end. And so this is getting right to it here, is that we have a lot of equipment that we need to find storage for. Like to stay in Orono, and it makes sense to us, certainly from an operational standpoint, that we have adjacent, that we do this additional storage adjacent to our current piece of property. Well, our current piece of property is so small, it doesn't afford any expansion whatsoever. As a matter of fact, it's so small that I don't know if it was a council plan, it would have been the council, I suppose, granted a variance back.
The appeals board.
Or the appeals board. So in 2004 it was then owned by April Fools Incorporated was the name of the people who owned the piece of land at the time. So we did approach the town planner to see what our options were on that. Basically, there are no options. Matter of fact, the actual building that's on that lot was shrunk down a little bit to meet some requirements, setbacks, and meet the variance that was granted. So looking at our options, it made sense to us, our need and our options. It made sense to us that, hey, maybe with this rather large parcel next door from Public Works, is that maybe we could enter into some sort of an agreement with the town to purchase some of the property that would be large enough to accommodate a storage building. Metal, we're looking at, I don't have a lot of specifics to share. No, I probably should be here at this point, but we'd be looking at a metal building that would be compatible with the Public Works garage, and certainly what's across the street if you're familiar with where we are with those other self-storage units. I had some brief conversations with Planner Kyle, and actually I reached out to Rob as well, the Public Works Director, and just to get some real early initial feedback. I know they're not the ones who make any kind of decisions, but I wanted to see if it was worthwhile from their perspective, perhaps going forward. And Kyle gave me some information as to how much land we might need to put the size building that we're looking at on, and that's where we came up with over half acre, 0.67 acres. Plus, it seemed to fit pretty neat in that little corner, that northeast corner of the Public Works property. Rob made a comment to me that he sees, if any, that from his viewpoint, if any expansion, if the Public Works needs to expand or with an additional building or more storage, that it's more likely from his perspective that it would be on the opposite side of the Public Works building, or on the westerly side of the property. That's where there's some outside storage right now. This corner of the property I'm talking about now, I brought a few more handouts that I think will clarify just kind of the area we're talking about, a nice aerial view so you can get an idea. But I didn't know it was a full council, so I brought 4 copies. So can we share it? Sure.
Absolutely, they can.
But the area we're talking about, this 0.67 acres, is wooded, currently wooded, and Now, as Sophie pointed out, there is adjacency of the parcel that we're talking about. There is adjacency to a stormwater treatment pond, but being an engineer and having done land development site plans for 30 years, I looked into the design of your property. I don't see any insurmountable, certainly. I don't even see any real issues. I avoided that outline that I show. I avoided some stormwater piping and everything. There isn't a lot going on in that point. That's the bottom line. And I can only speak for this here now, of course. If we were to combine the two lots, this lot would still not be a buildable lot, meaning we're not looking to, we're not looking to get a buildable lot out of this that maybe in the future we sell and make a big profit or anything. So we have no financial gain interest here. I would point out that it would make our existing non-conforming lot less non-conforming, which I think is always a good thing, I guess, right? Being in the business, it's less non-conforming. And the other thing is, I know there's setbacks and we can meet the setbacks. We can increase our setbacks with that much land. Actually, there was a question asked, and so there's still a lot of research to be done here as to whether or not the setbacks were increased at the time the planning board approved the public works building and things like that. So we uncover all of that information, certainly working with the town staff as we move forward if the council deems this appropriate. I know, and the last thing I've got is we'd be willing to, offer financial offer. We purchase this. We'd be not looking for donation, although that is how we operate our business. We do not get any grants or any financials other than from volunteers themselves or from families. But we'd also cover the costs of the town for lawyer fees and surveyor. I know you probably have to update the survey plan for the public works. So we'd be willing to fund those costs. And lastly, I know, having done this for 30 years, is the council might consider that. I know you don't like to set precedents, okay? And I would just like to throw out that something that, from my perspective, that this may not be, or maybe a caveat to perhaps some thinking of, we don't want to set a precedent. And the caveat is that we're not a developer looking to increase our land to get that one more lot that all the developers try to get. We're not we're not a homeowner trying to build that extra large deck or anything like that either. We are a nonprofit entity who's worked with the town a lot in the past. We're in the business of saving lives the best we can, and I would think that kind of could be a caveat that the council might consider. That would counter a precedent. So, Bob, do you have anything you want to add to that long-winded speech?
Wonderful speech. Yeah, I'd like to get the Humvees out of my front yard for my wife's request. Actually, as a nonprofit rescue, I've been living in Orono for, Louise, since '98 or so. I live at the corner of College and Park, and we try to do what we can for the town. I've worked with the police departments and the fire departments over the years, and I had the pleasure of being the medical director for 20 years, probably for Orono, as the town. So I'm familiar with the town. We always saw a need for something in between the resources that they don't have, that we might have, or can do in other areas they can't do. So we find ourselves in other parts of the state and other states as an institute. So, but over the years, it became logistically necessary for us to try to consolidate as best we can, because it gets expensive to store your stuff. And if we go from what we did, we built a hangar years ago down to the airport, and a year and a half or so from now, we're going to lose that hangar. So the board actually started planning and purchasing materials and building stuff to do things. And our concern is that the down at Orono or down at Bangor can be quite expensive to stay down there at this point. We still have full cooperation from them for fuel and low cost storage for our fixed wings and stuff. So all we have an issue for is our equipment that we use to support our rescue, and our Humvees need a place to live. They really do. Because they've been staying outside since they were donated to us 12 years ago by the Maine Military Authority. They were built them for us. Those need a home undercover because, as you guys know, any equipment left outside after that many years doesn't do any good service. So we're trying to take care of our gear to be able to do what we do and let our volunteers help them. A place for us to meet. We don't have a place to meet. So yeah, so we appreciate the consideration.
Questions from council?
I had a bunch of questions. Some of them were for our guests and some are for staff. So I could just ask some and then
Go right
let other
ahead.
people ask other, however you want to do it. But for you folks, my first question is, did you approach the other abutters
Other butters.
for the
residents.
other side?
The
of-
residents,
Yeah,
Yeah, we have spoken to them, but they don't want to sell.
okay,
There's a guy that owns the property out west of here. His son just graduated from the University of Maine. He wants to hold on for a couple more years. Or decides to do that. We did tentatively offer to him, but he, not an offer, but try to say, hey, do you interested in selling it? I personally talked to him.
okay.
But yeah, said that property could definitely use some improvement.
And my other question was, I'm curious if you could just talk a little bit about the choice to purchase it, knowing that it was so like non-conforming and not buildable for your needs.
Years ago, we actually talked to the guys, they Pools, the company that owned it, I guess.
I would love to know the story behind
Yeah.
that, but that's for another time.
Well, I'm wondering, there's like the three guys, and they're a fairly good sized business apparently. It's more like out of Maine or somewhere like that. They have a bunch of storage locations like this around. Apparently this one wasn't economically viable for them for what they were putting into it, the plow and all that stuff. So they let it go. And from what we discovered in the lockers, they were, have been probably about 20 years since somebody done that much. So they've been a while. And they were, so we approached them and we had an offer on the table to them and it was negotiated. And then years later, we came back and said, yeah, we're really looking around Orono for a place to put our storage. It's become more of a pressure. We decided to grab that, improve upon it and optimize it for what storage it could do. To get that kind of the ball rolling. But, again, then we right away, we went to the town trying to say, we'd really rather put a proper building in here, bigger and store it right. But then we got the setback or something was from the original exemption. Our interpretation when we bought it actually was that we could put something there. Then we found there wasn't enough room for the town order back. So we're like, okay, fine, then let's talk to the town. Because that's really land that you can't use. You can't get behind there. So so we had talked to people next door. I guess it's the only abutting. I don't know the term. So
So, yeah,
yeah,
a budding.
yeah. So behind us is, I think all town, isn't it?
I'm sorry.
Behind us all town, right? There's no other owner back
Yes.
there. Yeah, so that's the main budding person.
Really?
Yes, then we talk to you.
Said that too fast. Let
Well,
me
that's how
check.
you do it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're carved out of the original.
Yes, that town property behind us.
I don't want to monopolize the question. I do have a couple questions for Sophie, but if other people have questions.
I have a question for Sophie too. So my question is, and it's probably Megan's question, what else needs to happen? Like, what is the technical services that need to happen to get this? to-
So the information that you have thus far is a quick phone call from Rob Yerxa, our Public Works Director, to Owens McCullough, who was the engineer of record that helped with all of the design, the site plan here. While there are site plan review for the planning board should be fairly easy to do, but we have to do it before we could transfer ownership. The other thing, the Site Location of Development Act, Owens would need to understand what's gonna happen. Are they gonna clear the whole lot? Are they gonna, because that does, stormwater on this lot was hotly contested because we have bought the Caribou Law. And, so if you notice in your background packet, there's a red line. So while it looks like we have a huge lot, our SLOTA has mandated that we not do any development on the other side of that line. So essentially, we can't go any further back than we already are. We can't clear any land, we can't do anything on that side. And that is again because of the concerns around stormwater runoff. I'm not an engineer. I would bow to Vinyl in that capacity. I really would. I've worked with him for years and he has been a really good consulting engineer in my experience. I just know when we went through this process, there were significant concerns raised about stormwater runoff, and that the buffering here was kind of key to that permitting. So the reason I bring this forward is if we were gonna move forward, I really need to engage Owens to understand more about the project and what the change to our stormwater runoff would be. As Rob Yerxa often says, you know, he does it in the context of money. With money, I can do anything. So in discussion, there are probably ways to manage that. It will cost the consulting engineering time to be able to do that. And this is one of those times that I think it's important that we have somebody who is an independent looking at that. And then we would ask him, given what Rob's got on his plate right now with the bond money and other projects in his realm right now, we would be asking Owens to move forward with the SLOTA permit. Revision, if that's where you want it to go. So the reason Vinyl and I are coming to you so early before we really have a lot of answers is because, as Vinyl says, wants to know if it's even possible, because the last thing that Demi wants to do is put time and energy into a process that the council doesn't have any interest in moving it forward. We have not looked to see if perhaps there might be some other places that might work for them. We haven't had those discussions yet.
Thank you so much.
I actually have really mixed feelings about this. I'm very sympathetic to the organization and the good work that they do. And from that perspective, I really like to accommodate. I was on the council when we looked for a site for our public works building, and we looked at many sites. Many of them did not fit our needs. And we were really excited when we found this particular site, even though a large portion of it, we can't develop anything on. So I would want to be assured, really assured, by some real thoughtful work on the towns we have, that we don't have a future need for that land. The size of the lot was what we wanted to begin with. We paid a significant amount of money for it. And again, very sympathetic to the need of this organization, but also wanting to be sure that we look to the future and that this is not land that 10 years down the road, we're not going to say, oh my gosh, why did we do that? We need that.
Yeah, that was one of my list of questions is, you know, does this restrict a future use for us? Because, you know, when we say us, any land that's held by the town is held by every member of this community, and selling it is a big deal. And like Tom, I would be I would need to be very certain that we weren't restricting a future use for the taxpayers, since this is their land. That would be my major concern. I also would like to hear more about the water filtration system. We talked about the stormwater, but what is this underground water filtration system that may be an issue?
So I am not an engineer.
But you're sitting next to
But
me.
you play one on television.
Yeah, I can make a guess. I wasn't, yeah, you want me to handle that?
You make a guess because I have no
So I'll
idea.
make a guess. So when you develop a parcel of land, there's a certain amount, as you know, impervious buildings and parking lot. And all that has to go somewhere, the rainfall that's collected, and it needs to go somewhere. That's a filtration system, so it gets the nasties, so to speak, out of the stormwater before it continues downhill to the wetland. I haven't seen the permit in detail, but there are calculations that with stormwater calculations that the engineer does that kind of says, okay, we've got this much impervious land and we've got this much pervious land, meaning woods or whatever, and altogether it all gets in a big number cruncher and says, there's so much stormwater, and that's what your permit is based on. So if the site and the permit has to be right at borderline, then no, we'd have to come up with some other engineering techniques to compensate for the lost trees that we would have to clear. But there might be some leftover, that it wouldn't trip a threshold. There might be some leftover wooded area, so to speak, that could be given up and not affect the burn.
Okay,
I'm
so
glad I'm retired. I can't
You're doing an excellent
speak as
job.
clearly as I used
you are
to.
doing an excellent job. That was very clear. So I guess, to combine sort of both things that Tom and I are talking about here and Cheryl is like, what it sounds like there are a lot of unknowns and that there would have to be a commitment of resources to determine the things that would really be stumbling blocks for council. And so my biggest question is then, what is the town, what would be the proposed financial and or resource commitment up front by the town to determine whether or not we would be comfortable selling this property? Because that's a whole other can of worms.
I think we could get some initial information for $1,500, probably, maybe 2,000. I will tell you that I've been scratching because, as we talk and I listen to what Dr. Bowie said, I am also wondering if we ask Demi to take a look at the old Public Works garage and all of the community discussions. There has not been like this is what that should absolutely be used for. There are some considerations to that site that don't make it something that for redevelopment is a high priority. There is a building there that would need work to be demoed, but that gives them 3.5 acres of space to look at.
That's a possibility, and it really depends on Davey. The only, I can see some positives in that, and definitely, and it might help the town with some of the liquidating that property or something. The only thing is, we like the adjacency of having, okay, when we say go to the storage site, we got one storage site and we can bring stuff between one building and another, but we're not looking for water or sewer or anything. This would just be cold storage building, but so we wouldn't need some of the aspect, but
I can take that to the board though, and there's no reason why I can't. They're open-minded about, the main thing is that if we feel like it's a safe location for storage of our equipment. There's a pretty high dollar aviation gear.
So I will tell you that we would probably want to get the current building itself demos. That would not, I don't think we want to put stuff in there, and I think it all depends. Public Works was there for one time with no issue, but when we closed everything up and clearly left the site with what we had set up before, it was vandalized. So it affects the fact of student housing. Now, fencing it might help, or some other things might help, but I don't know. And I think that the thing for us to look at, if you're interested in moving forward, the next step I would take, Megan, is to contact Owens and ask for scope and see what he thinks this will take, because this is not only is Rob's timeline not going to mesh with Dean's, and I think it's important we don't want them to lose their storage as we plan things through, but it's also beyond our technical ability.
I would appreciate the suggestion. I think that's something I'll definitely bring it up to them, but obviously they want to know more about it. But, we'll take a look at it. And we also wrote any suggestions you guys might have. We'd rather be in Orono. We're tied heavily with the University of Maine right now. It just makes sense for us to be here. We'd rather not be in DC, we'd rather not be in Bangor, we'd rather be. We'll have to have you here. No, I'm just saying, so it's kind of like a weird.
To move the whole operation to that site
Well, it can be, but again, that's becomes part of
instead of going back and forth?
our
to storage?
cost,
Yeah,
because we're donating completely.
right.
And so I have a fiduciary responsibility on the board to not, I mean, he volunteers all his time as an engineer to us.
Right.
So it's too bad that he couldn't actually do some of the engineering, you know, but but I understand conflicts of interest and stuff like that, but my wish is that we find a good place here that doesn't put us underwater.
Yeah.
Then it does no good.
I just wanted, I think John makes a very good point, about us not needing that space in the future is probably pretty critical. I don't know how, but assuming we check that box that, yes, we're comfortable with not expanding that way. And then you reach out to engage with, whoever engineering firm, as you just said, and it's gonna be 1,500, 2,000. Would we, I guess at that point, come back to Demi and say, we can get this, we check the box, we're not gonna need the space. It's gonna be 2,000 to engage. The answer might be, we can't do it. At that point, do we absorb the cost or does Demi absorb the cost of the exploration?
I think we'd obviously have to take care of the costs associated, the town shouldn't be at risk for that.
Yeah.
But neither do we want to be, you know, held to, you know, an unending. fees. We've been on the end of some of lawyers and stuff, but we've just been dragged right through the mud over
Yeah,
a lot of costs.
I would suggest as a next step, we do two things. I think if Demi could just go take a look at the old Public Works site. Just
Absolutely.
take a look, because if that could be, that might be a win in that it's currently space that the town doesn't have a particular use for. That might be a win-win for a nonprofit, who knows? But if you could go take a look at that site, and we could go back to Owens and get a budget for what this would cost to shepherd us through the process,
Sure.
we can share that with both of you. I'm not, this is not part of my regular budget, so I would not engage Owens without some okay from the council that this is something we want to pursue.
So,
which may involve an agreement with.
Yeah. yeah, maybe a letter or whatever.
Yeah.
Somehow.
Is there an actual pond? Is that what you said? There's a.
It's a filter pond, so over a 24-hour period, it's supposed to filter 24 to 48 hours, it would filter all the stormwater through, so no, there's no surface water.
So
Looks like grass. It's basically a depression, a grass depression with pipes and sand underneath.
And a leach field. kind of, or something.
Yeah, well, it's like a detention pond where we slow down the flow out, but it's really it's a filter.
And it's on this property that you've outlined here?
no.
No,
it's right-
no.
So in
No.
the background,
Okay,
it's
that's what I
the
was trying to
white,
understand.
the
Okay.
white triangle, the white rectangle.
So that way.
Yeah.
That's why I have a little zig line there is to avoid that area.
It comes right up
There, that's where. Okay. That's the
next to it.
No, that's a central fuel operation.
Yeah, well, that's what I was getting at.
And I
That
think
seems odd.
Okay,
just in the initial conversation with Owens, what his thought is what we would have to do on the other side in terms of, if we were to deed that parcel over, we would have to really, it would have to be for a very specific footprint. Things would have to be calculated. There might be requirements that they shed water in certain directions, that it's not just cut this out and you can have it. It's, yeah, it's a little complicated.
and the permit might include X square feet of future development, for all I know. I didn't read it, and in that case, there's some buffer there, that.
Any other questions, council, at this point? Sounds that we have a next step at least.
So I'm gonna reach out and get a scope from Owens. It's Sebago technically, I'm just assuming. And you guys take a look.
We'll review it there and get the board involved.
And then Lionel's been very easy to communicate with, so.
And I think the other ingredient from my perspective is, I don't know, that's Rob and you and whoever else needs to be involved, really taking a hard look at the potential future use. And is there no potential future use for the town on that piece of property? That small.
Will you
piece of
do
property?
that?
I mean, that's, I will say that's. Yeah, look, yes,
As far as you can determine.
well, it's important to look at not just the next 5 years or 10 years. Yeah, I hear what you're saying.
Just roughly, you know, like compared to our old site to this site, did we expand a lot or did we not expand a lot?
Oh, they expanded a ton.
Okay.
They added a whole new fleet bay on the back of it.
I mean, like this, like the, call it the, I guess, impervious surface, is that also significantly bigger than we had over there?
Absolutely,
Okay,
absolutely.
I definitely appreciate not, not cutting our nose to spite our face here, I guess that's not the right term, but being cautious of that, but I also maybe wondering too, how much do we want to grow? And it's a hard question, obviously, because to know where we're gonna be in 15 or 20 years, but.
We have anybody in the virtual audience or in the room that wants to comment on this before we leave this topic? No.
Appreciate it.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate the presentation. Next up is discussing the process of organizing and selecting membership for the newly formed Town Council Advisory Committee on Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging.
So, in August, the council, created the, advisory committee. You adopted a charge and you said, go promote it. We promoted it once, I think had 2 applications, so we promoted it again. We are up to, 7, we got another one today or over the weekend. We are gonna do another round of promotions. I spoke with the council chair. One of the things that I did talk to staff about, when they promote this, I think it's been kind of a vague promotion. We're gonna use some more words this time. Because I think it's important for people to understand this isn't, designed to be a larger social cause, that this is really pivoted and really focused on what is happening here in Orono with the town of Orono government. And we'll see if we can attract a few more people that way. In the meantime, so I've reached out to everybody except for the one that the application we just received this morning, to let them know that we've received their application, that we're gonna promote a little bit longer, that we were gonna have a conversation today, and I would be back in touch with folks to let them know what the process would be. But it occurred to me, and Tom and I had some significant conversation about this, but it occurred to me that council has not kind of created the liaison to this committee, who would normally be the person that I would be having these conversations with and moving things forward with. The other thing is there really hasn't been a process. So one of the things that happens when somebody applies for employment with the town, that's confidential. You can have a discussion behind closed doors about their strengths and their weaknesses and what they bring or don't bring. One of the issues that we found when we have volunteer opportunities is that it can be really uncomfortable when you're trying to pick a single person for a role, whether it's because there are multiple people applying for that same role, or whether it's because you have a specific idea in mind. So the last thing we would want to do is to have people, or the last thing I would want to do is have people who have put themselves out there to be part of this committee be kind of analyzed in a public forum, streamed live on Facebook. So just because that's how I feel, doesn't mean that's the way council feels, but I wanted to bring this back to make sure that council has an opportunity to talk about how they want to get to who the committee members will be. Ultimately, that choice is made at a final formal council meeting with an order that's published in advance. But to get from application to selecting those people who are gonna be on the board, I kind of wanted to have council weigh in and what that would look like, and also whether or not you are ready and wanting to have to appoint an actual liaison that would be kind of the prime contact for staff. Have I set that up? okay?
Did summarized it well. So one of the thoughts I had, I'll just throw it out there, is I guess I'd like to see us establish a subcommittee to review applications and bring recommendations to the entire group for our final action. And if it's a subcommittee of two, we go, is that the,
So according to, if you selected a liaison.
Yeah.
And then they selected another person, then it's not a subcommittee.
Okay.
And you can have discussion back and forth. As soon as you formally appoint a subcommittee of the
Gotcha.
town council, it's a public meeting. Now, you can have public meetings that are not streamed, that are not recorded, that is, they're posted in two places saying that we're meeting on certain date to do a certain thing. And people who are really invested could show up and participate. We tend not to get a lot of a lot of people that do, but one person asking another person for help is not a public meeting. A formal subcommittee turns it into a public.
Which is sort of how Laura and I worked on it with the ad hoc committee, was two counselors helping each other out.
so it wasn't a formal
It was not.
subcommittee? Thank you.
That's good to know. That was my question, is how was it done last time, so.
So the other thing that was done last time is, our interpretation halfway through that process about what had to be public and didn't, was overturned by our attorney. And so we learned halfway through the process that it needed to change, and made a decision at that point that we had asked these people to come forward and help without knowing it was gonna be a big public thing, and just said, we're into it for a dime, let's be into it for $1 and finish this process. Which is why Environment Committee was changed and some other things have changed in terms of process.
Can you, that's what I was gonna ask about. Can you, what is, I sympathize with what you're saying, right? Someone puts their name out, hey, I want to volunteer, and then you're getting public interview like that is a little awkward, I think. What do we do on do we have anything like this from a subcommittee, and how did we choose those? Because there could be people that don't get picked, and I'm curious how that has gone down.
So, with our committees that are kind of off to the side, so tree board, trails committee, the library trustees, those all internally promote and select members, recommend to town council. And as long as I've been here, council has never said no. I will say that most of the time, we are beating the bushes for people to volunteer. And so a lot of time, we put stuff out there to please apply, and nobody applies. And so then we as staff sit around a table and brainstorm who we think we could con into doing it. Nothing, but ever been on the other side of that.
And not to say that that's not currently happening.
Yeah,
because it is.
but I think, those are easier for staff to kind of go out and say, this person, like, we have the local board of assessment review, we have 2 names we're gonna bring to you. One of them is somebody who is very knowledgeable about real estate and the housing market in Orono, and the other one is a lawyer. That's pretty much a no-brainer. We went out and found both of them because it had been advertised for 6 months.
Yeah.
This is a little bit different because I think there are a lot of nuances in this position that you might get people who apply who are very well intended, but you might have other people that also have already kind of filled that role. And so I don't know that I can use I wish I could say, this is how you should do it. I mean, when we've had situations in the past, we have had council workshops, which prior to the pandemic were never recorded. There were no audio or videotape to them. We would do council workshops and invite the candidates in. Very rarely were there audience people around for that. Council would have a discussion about that. A couple of times it's ended up in a more formal setting and it has been very uncomfortable. I mean, just the feel in the room is very uncomfortable, and some of the people who haven't been selected out of that, instead of coming forward and wanting to do different things, have kind of faded away, and that didn't feel.
The other side of this is that it ends up kind of potentially being sort of a pet project for whoever the liaison is. With one input, with maybe asking for help or whatever, but. And I'm not sure I'm crazy about that process. Personally.
However, that would only be a recommendation to the council.
Right.
And the council would see all the applications, those are public, those would all come to everything, but, you know, you could. I mean, I see kind of a continuum, you could go uber formal, which I think I've expressed how my concern with that. I think, Leo, you're on the other side of this one person making a decision about a committee that's ultimately gonna impact the entire council. I think, you know, in that happy medium in between the two, you have, you know, the council's gonna do it, but we're gonna do it in the workshop format, and we're gonna have it very low key. We're gonna have a subcommittee and we'll notice it, but we won't, you know. Or
Stream
you can, yeah, we won't stream it, we won't do that kind of stuff. So I mean, I think you've got some in between.
And I guess where we're maybe struggling, like all communities, I think, to get volunteers. Not that means nobody's gonna be turned away, I guess, but it is maybe less likely that we have to cut, sort of thing. I don't know. But I think I like what you did, the second option you were talking about.
Again, the second option was.
Of being, you know, a subcommittee, it's not gonna be streamed, we're talking about people.
Yep.
I think that's reasonable, and people, it's public, people can come, people should be able to see the process.
I feel comfortable with that too, and would be happy to serve on that subcommittee if you're looking for volunteers. And then a couple other thoughts I had is, I know sort of council had been asked, spread the word about this, and I personally have done very little due diligence in actually getting the word out, but I was brainstorming a list of people I wanted to get the word out to, and then also I was wondering if we could put it on the kiosk that this application is open.
Yeah, it was out there for a while.
Okay.
We'll cycle through and get it
Yeah,
back out there.
let's get
It's- We're kind of working on the message. We want it to be a little bit different than it was before.
Excellent.
And I just, for FYI, have already reached out individually to all of the ad hoc committee members
Fabulous.
and asked them if they would be willing to serve, and also if yes or no, if they would be able to spread that word among their networks as well.
That was one of my other questions.
We've already
whether-
got some good feedback from them, so hopefully their networks will.
Interesting, cool, thanks for getting the word out that way.
Any other comments or questions on this?
I just second Sonia's volunteering for potentially taking that role as liaison. I would say I support that. I think Sonia would do a great job, has a lot of experience
So
in organizing all sorts of things.
I would be happy to serve as liaison to the committee ultimately, but I think what I just volunteered for was to be on the.
Gotcha.
I'm still trying to sort out, when we say subcommittee, we are not talking about just like two counselors. We're talking about basically doing a workshop.
So workshop.
With
And I-
open to the public and not being broadcast.
Yeah, so it feels a little more low pressure to
So-
people who are gonna.
So then that means we're all
Yeah.
We're all
We'll all
volunteers
do
for that.
And I would suggest 2 meetings for that. One would be to review the applications and be able to sit down and decide, you know, what you thought about that. And then the next one would be to talk to people if you wanted to hold those interviews like we normally do with planning board and some other values. So I don't know if it's, since it's gonna be so open, while I love volunteers, I I would think we could just do it as a workshop and have everybody come. I would suggest we not attach it to a regular.
Yes,
Agree.
special workshop.
Yeah, I suppose it's, I mean, it's the same as, it's the same that is done when the council elects a school board member, when the council selects a school board member. It's almost like an interview process.
Yes,
It is an interview process. Almost. Can I ask of the 7, how many are Orono residents?
Nice, go grab, there's a folder that Nancy has that's called committee applications. And yes, committee is spelled incorrectly.
20.
One T.
I'll let them answer it.
Double
Yes,
letter.
question. Is there anything else we need to discuss on this particular topic?
Wanna. Do we wanna get through this process and then decide who would be the liaison?
I think so.
So.
At a later date.
Sure. Yeah, 6 from Orono. There are some who have not put their town in, but they look like reasonable Orono addresses, and 1 from Old Town.
Ready to move on? Then let's go to item C, which is fire department data analysis and public outreach project.
It's not often that you see an exclamation point on a council agenda. It was very exciting.
Oh,
I got too excited while I was reading it.
this is what happens at 6 o'clock on a Friday night. We have deputy chief. Oh, do we have Jeff?
He's
Ready to?
he's rejoining us. Yep.
I'm coming. Hold on. There you go.
You're up.
Am I, okay. Sorry, I lost you all there for just a second. So good evening, Jeff Lowe, Fire Chief, Town of Orono, actually Public Safety Director, whatever you want to call me, I guess. I want to sit with you tonight and let you know that we are getting ready to do some public education. The fire department's going to go out in the community, door to door. And we're going to start addressing some of the issues or providing information on some of the issues that we're seeing locally. There are some maps. I don't know if Bell has them up or not. We'd probably start with that. So the first map that I'm going to show you would be the district map. And that is that map right there. Is that as good as it's going to get, Bell?
Yeah, for some reason, my computer doesn't want to load and run Zoom all at the same time. So
Okay.
this is what we're going to get, unfortunately.
Good enough. So we divide, in the fire department, we divide the town up into districts, similar to what the US Census Bureau does when they break the town into census tracts. And it just allows us to track where calls are occurring, what the calls are, those types of things. So everything will start west of I-95. Everything west of I-95 would be District 26, as you can see there on the map. District 24 is from the VZ town line up to the Stillwater River in the north, and then bordered by I-95 in the west and the Penobscot on the east side of the town. District 251 is north of Stillwater, again bordered by Penobscot, and goes up to the Old Town town line. And then District 25 is a special district. That's for the University of Maine. So what we did is we went through and we looked at all of the districts except for the University of Maine, because that is a separate That's a separate area that has special requirements and stuff like that. We went through the data that we have available to us. We pulled that off our dispatch software and our our incident reports, those types of documents. And we looked at what some of the major calls are that we are experiencing or have experienced over the last year. And we thought, where this is October, Fire Prevention Month, what we decided to do is take an opportunity to go out and introduce ourselves to the public. And based off of the information that we have pulled from the data, we're going to present some keyed or targeted campaigns, if you will, for those areas. So for example, if you remember District 24 that we talked about before just a second ago, which is the area from VZ up to the Stillwater River, we see a lot of false alarms that occur in that area. Very often it's smoke alarms that are malfunctioning. It's fire alarms that have been tripped by steam from showers, from cooking, those types of things. So what we're going to do is we're going to go out, we're going to provide some general fire safety handouts, and then we're going to provide some additional information specifically on how smoke alarms work, what smoke alarms you should have, which are better for certain types of situations, and those types of things. Each district has its own challenges. So for 24, like we talked about, fire alarms, like I mentioned, District 251 is fire alarms primarily, and there are also, let me pull my data here. 251, we're seeing fire alarms, and we are seeing some service calls that relate to water leaks, steam leaks, those types of issues. So we'll certainly look at some of those issues there. And then out in 26, which is referred to as out back or west of I-95, it's really a whole group of different types of calls that we see out there. Not as many. If you look at the map, it is a heat map, so you can see that the yellow and the red indicate higher call volume in those particular areas. And then 26, which is out west of I-95, you see sporadic calls here and there. And those calls relate from everything from represent rather everything from building fires to hazardous conditions such as electrical problems to good intent calls and those types of things. So we're just going to go out probably in that district and deliver some general fire and safety type of information. You can see there that we've got on the bottom of the chart there's some calls by quarter that have come up. And that's pretty much what we're going to do. We just wanted to take an opportunity to relate this to you, let you know what's going on in the community, what we plan on doing. And as we continue forward, we'll be collecting more data and trying to get a better understanding of the needs and the experiences we're having in the community as it relates to fire and EMS calls.
So the reason that I asked Chief to come join you in this very valuable community committee development committee time is because anytime that truck rolls and people get out and walk door to door, folks are gonna wonder what's going on. Why are people knocking on doors? So what we wanted to show you is that not everybody's gonna get the same message because it depends on what their data is showing. But the goal here is to touch in some way everybody with some information. It's also a good time to remind people to take care of their properties, their fire alarms, their smoke detectors, that kind of stuff.
You're getting an education I think that's great.
When do they hope to start?
Chief?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question.
When do you hope to start, Chief?
I would hope to start either this week or at the latest one day next week, and really get out there and force to do what we're hoping to do.
You gonna work with the schools at all?
So fire
Is that-
prevention in the schools is a different program. I happened to walk into a meeting today about that. You have your fire prevention committee working on that.
Yeah, so I think this year we're going to do what we traditionally do with the schools, which is have some of the classes come up. We'll have a general fire safety talk. And then we will, show them the trucks and those types of things. My intent for next year and moving forward, of course, with the cooperation of the school, is to start early with fire prevention messages, deliver them but expand them each year over 3 or 4 years. And then at the 4th year, evaluate the students to see where they're at as to how much they retained, what was of value to them, what wasn't, and if they used any of the information. The idea behind that is, if we're able to be successful in doing that, then that will open up doors for us for additional grant funding and those types of things to deliver an even better product to the schools in the outlying years. But we have a real data void right now in understanding exactly what our program does and how effective it is. So that's really an essential component to really prove that the program is worthwhile and to seek additional funding.
Good plan. I think the education's great, and getting out in the community, I think, is great. So all in all, and I will say at the schools, that was my reminder typically to change my battery when my kid came home. So I gotta change my battery. So that's a worthwhile investment also. I do have a question, and in my mind, when I heard, a lot of false alarms, I took that as there's this negative connotation to it, but I want to be, I guess, clear that obviously there wouldn't be, correct? Because I think
No,
from
no.
your perspective, the idea is, when in doubt, call us. But I'm just how I process that, and then I thought through it further. So there is no negative connotation to false alarms, correct?
No, we would rather run 100 false alarm calls than actually have a true incident. And 99% of the false alarm calls we run are not malicious. It's not like somebody's doing something intentionally wrong to cause that activation of the alarm and summon us. It's faulty smoke detector, or they were cooking, and burnt food is a really significant issue with false alarms and that type of stuff. So, and it happens. We're in a college community, and the experience level sometimes isn't there, and that stuff just happens. So like I say, we'd rather run the calls and have it be nothing.
Thanks, Chief. Send around some links to cooking videos, to help people get a little bit more adept in the kitchen.
Any questions for Chief? Sounds like a great program. Forward to hearing how it goes.
Thank you.
Ready to move on? Then we will have plan implementation. Megan.
All right, we're going to review the planning board report and discuss next steps related to proposed parking ordinance revision, reducing minimum parking standards. Kyle.
Hi, everyone. So yeah, just a quick overview of the planning board meeting. The draft ordinance revision went to the board in September for review and recommendation. I mean, it's a pretty small amendment from actual written capacity. So, the conversation centered more around, the idea of parking itself than, any sort of actual language changes to the document. There were no public comments. I think there was only one member of the public actually in attendance at the meeting, but there were no public comments made during the public hearing aspect. The planning board, I think, was largely in favor of the idea. I think there was a little hesitation around some behavioral implications, which as we talked about when we first brought up the draft at the committee level, which is, I think, what led to the kind of high requirement in the first place, is being in a community with a lot of rental housing and the potential for a lot of unrelated people living together. There was this thought that to base the minimum parking requirement off of sort of the maximum occupancy level. So we talked with the board about getting away from that, letting the developers really have the ability to choose what sort of housing and residential unit they're looking to provide, and having the responsibility for developing the level of parking that they actually want to have and not punishing other people who might not be interested in developing that sort of style residential dwelling. So that was the bulk of the conversation. But sort of a result at the end of it was the board didn't make any formal recommendations for any changes or additions or anything, and felt that it was good to move forward with. So the next step would be, I think, to schedule a council public hearing for review. I'm not sure when, Sophie, exactly, if that was an October or a November thing, but that would be the next phase for this.
If council agrees, the plan would be to call the public hearing in October or November.
Okay, so questions, comments about this? Or are folks ready to call the public hearing? Yes.
Questions. Is there any way, it looks like the planning board, I think, raised what anybody in the public that's looking at this is gonna raise. I mean, we've gone around the table. I think, yeah, I'm very supportive of this, but I do wonder if we, and it's a crystal ball exercise, I guess, but it says, I mean, this could create a lot of on-street parking. So do we have any sort of exercise or analysis? Or even like it said, we have other ways to deal with that if that happens. Could we maybe enumerate those just to understand? I don't know, because I'm curious myself, like maybe it's no parking on signs and things like that. Because that is, and I've thought about it with this other development, this other contract zone as well. That that if we push a bunch of cars to the street, that is going to be an impact on neighbors and neighborhoods. So just a little more thought or feedback on what those solutions might look like should that happen.
Yeah, so first, I think it's important to consider that it's not, there's no guarantee that it's going to force any parking to the street. If a developer chooses, a new housing project and the developer wants to have 3 bedrooms in every unit, and the idea is that they're going to rent each bedroom out to a person with their own car, while they're not required to build 3 spaces per unit, it would probably be in their interest, if there isn't ample year-round public parking options, to build the 3 spaces per unit. There, and as far as existing housing goes, the parking would, it's unlikely that people would start taking parking away and going through that exercise just because the minimum requirement went down. So I don't think it's a guarantee that all of a sudden there's this huge flood of on-street parking. I think in cases where people have, visitors, if there's a dwelling and they regularly have a number of people coming to the house who don't live there, I think the effect to on-street parking is probably going to be pretty minimal, whether that dwelling provided 2 off-street parking spaces or 3 off-street parking spaces, if they're having, larger gatherings. And then if, sort of, issues arise there as far as whatever noise levels, or, just from the sheer number of people or cars blocking, the street or not parked in places where they should be, then I think that becomes an enforcement matter through the police.
Yeah, and for the record, I don't think it's clearly, hopefully it's not a guarantee. I think if it was a guarantee, if you may have, I'd probably have a different opinion. I don't think that, I'm hoping it's minimal, but I think it's realistic to expect that there could be also. And I'm just wondering, because I think it mentions in here, there are ways that we can deal with that down the road.
Yeah.
I don't know what those ways are.
So I think we've had situations in the past with with rental properties, and this isn't something I usually deal directly with, so I don't know if, Dan or Mitch or someone else can speak to it better. But there are situations, where non-conforming situations exist, and maybe they only have 2 off-street parking spaces for the house, but they rent to 3 people, so they need, and so now these new occupants come with their 3 vehicles, and there's only 2 places to park. And then finding a solution, whether it's an enforcement matter of, someone's parking somewhere on the street where they shouldn't be, and having to deal with that and work with the landlord and the tenants as far as finding a kind of sustainable solution, whether it's utilizing a neighboring lot's parking or one of the public spaces in town or something like that. But really, I think that the long-term sustainable piece there is the landlord and tenants communicating properly as far as advertising where kind of year-round parking spaces are, and not making the assumption that just because there's on-street space available means that that's always going to be a space that you can park in. But on the kind of flip side is not, yes, there could be situations there. I don't think we run into a ton of them, but not using that kind of rare or occasional situation to justify high parking requirements across the board for every situation, I think is what we're trying to get away from here.
So to more bluntly answer, I think Kyle has given a really good technical answer. But to be a little bit more blunt, town council decides where people can park in town and how that works. And when we have issues, the first place it comes is to me and Dan and Rob Yerxa to sit together, and we have some authorities to make decisions. We've got an area right now, for example, where people are parking and the way they're parking is a little too haphazard, and we're thinking we likely need to look at banning parking on one side of the street so people can get out of their homes. So there are ways that we can ensure if it becomes a true problem, we can address that. And I think the other thing he's talking about is the market. So when you have places to rent that have driveways that fit enough cars and parking spaces, and places that, and somebody's coming in to put a new apartment building in, that doesn't have a place for their car, probably not gonna necessarily select this. And so I would think developers would be thinking about that. But I do think it's important to understand that we're not saying let's go from an average or where a lot of the region is and drop down below that. We're saying our current numbers are much higher than Bangor, Brewer, Camden, places that are also fairly dense, which is creating an issue when developers are trying to build the smaller housing units, which tend to be the less costly. And in order to make the finances work, they want to put more of them in. When you're asking for 2 or 3 cars for 1 bedroom, that kind of, it makes it really hard, and it flies in the face of some of our environmental standards around impervious surface and lot coverage.
And new development is key as well, because this is about new development, and there's only a finite amount of development that can even happen in the town, and so much of the town either already has a non-conforming situation or was developed under the current parking standards. So it's not like it's gonna be a bonanza across the whole town of like no parking.
I'm ready to schedule this one.
Great.
All right, so we'll do that.
Okay, thank you, Kyle, and
All right,
I will
thanks.
pass it right back to you.
Why, thank you. And we're back on finance and operations, and our item tonight is changes in parking enforcement practices, which is quite interesting.
Yes, it is.
So before I hand this over to our very capable chief law enforcement officer, I just want to be very clear what the intent of tonight is. So, staff has received information that tells us that a longstanding practice is no longer constitutional. Staff has immediately ceased the practice. But it is of potential impact to the community. So the first thing I've asked Dan to come tonight, able to talk to you about the Supreme Court case in general and how it impacts us. And also then on a broader spectrum to figure out what, if anything, council wants to do. Understanding that your guidance is then going to send us out to find options. So this is not, we want to do this, tell us all about this option, because we literally have 2 days of time invested in this spot.
So I was Dan Merrill, Chief of Police for the Police Department. I was scrolling through my emails last week on Wednesday, I think, and I got an email saying it was just a, periodic bulletin where there's new law updates or circuit courts that I get in my emails that might be of interest. So I came across this one that was from the 6th Circuit, which is Tennessee, Kentucky, Ohio, and Michigan. So it's not the circuit that we're in necessarily for the courts. But when I read this review, it was, in my opinion, putting other circuits on notice that the practice that we were utilizing, or that we were utilizing prior to me reading this, physically chalking people's tires as a way to mark where cars are in the timed parking spaces down on Mill Street and in the Pine Street lot, is a violation of Fourth Amendment in the sixth court's opinion. So with that, I went over and saw Sophie and I said, hey, I think that we're gonna need to bring this up, because while it's not governing here, I think that I've been put on notice. This is a violation of an amendment. And I don't want to put the town in a place where we could be violating somebody's rights for something like enforcing parking. So we're here to solicit guidance as to what it is you guys would like me to look into for other options. I reached out to some other towns after I met with Sophie last week, just to figure out what other chiefs are doing. And it runs the gamut. It can be a hired contract service like what Bangor does to enforce their downtown businesses, or it could be as simple as a handheld device that we can take photographs and issue tickets off electronically. So
I'm gonna add a little bit to that. The court opinion is holding the practice of physically marking in a private citizen's vehicle as unconstitutional. They're likening it to putting a GPS tracking device on a vehicle. So it's not the idea of having timed parking regulations. It's not the idea of enforcing somebody's ability to be in a spot for a certain amount of time. So when we look at that, when you think about parking in Orono, it is important. It has been communicated to me very strongly over my tenure here that parking enforcement downtown, especially in certain times of the day to get that turnover, which is why we have, you can't park here for more than a certain number of hours, is important. Given our staffing levels and constraints, it is a lot of it is on people's goodwill, honor system. And occasionally we're able to say, hey, we're getting some complaints downtown, let's do some parking enforcement. Chucking the tires was an easy way to go through, mark them, come back in 2 hours and know that whoever is still there was in the same spot and they needed to be ticketed. So when we think about differences, what I know is that systematic approach does not work. When I think about the idea of taking pictures of people's cars with like cell phones or stuff like that. The idea of organizing and analyzing that is going to be counterproductive to that idea of, can I just wander downtown, market, come back in a couple hours and do it again? So if we did nothing at all, and Dan is gonna hop in if I'm wrong on any of this. If we did nothing at all, and we said, okay, we are not gonna have systematic enforcement practices anymore. Instead, if Bruce has a pink Cadillac sitting out in front of his car, out in front of his restaurant, and it's been there for 5 hours and he wants to turn it over because the rush is coming, he can call the police department. They can come down, take a look at it, take a complaint, come back in 2 hours and still issue a ticket. That is gonna go into the same kind of priority that we've kind of always had, which is when we have time and the availability, people able to do that, we would make that happen. So that's the do nothing approach. If we wanted to say, you know what, we really need a systematic approach in order to facilitate what downtown businesses need for turnover. We have a couple of options that Dan and I have not looked into at great lengths, but there is the handheld system that is designed for this, where you take a picture of license plate, you take a picture of the something, I'm not gonna say what on live TV. It tells you when you go back, it's organized and set up for you to easily manage that. So it's still that same idea of kind of walking back down through. Still will take a little bit more time than chalking. So one of the things we have to be careful of when we do parking enforcement is that we are creating sections, segments, areas that when we go down through, we do it all, that we're not picking and choosing. So if it's by complaint, that's one thing. If it's a system, we have to be very careful to not have a system that only targets one area. So that's one option. That handheld will cost around $15,000.
$15,000.
15 is the number that budget number that we came up with. Now, we haven't done a lot of research. There might be other similar products out there.
Plus engineering costs, there's like infrastructure technology stuff we gotta buy, so it's not just a one-time purchase.
The other option that you have, and we talked about this after staff and I went to Durham several years ago now, was the idea of the kiosk, which sounds big, but some of them are actually very small, where you can essentially, it's almost like going to the deli, you get your little ticket, and you put it on your windshield, and it tells you what time it is, and that's fine, as long as we don't have to touch the car. We can go down through, and anybody who's over time could get whatever they get, which sometimes we do those and it's just warnings, sometimes we do that and we're ticketing because we've already done warnings. So that's an option. That kiosk, you can get ones that are simple and just timestamp. You can get ones that you can program to take money later on or now, so you have that flexibility. In Durham, they had one that gave a certain amount of free time and then time after that, where you had to charge. Those kiosks cost in the $15,000 to $20,000 range. If you go into cities, one of the newer pieces of technology is the app on the phone, where you can come in, you've got all the spaces are numbered, you say what space it is, you sign up for time. If you're getting overtime, I was at a pub and I just, put it in and got more time. So there are options. We have not looked into the pricing. So some of the constraints that I think council wants to think about, you have some of the maybe constraints, some of the elements that you might want to think about. You have a business community. I think it would be important for us to reach out to the business community to see where they stand on that. So I've already talked to Mitch and Dan about trying to set up a meeting with our business community downtown to talk about how important is parking. You also have issues around not only the capital outlay, but if that capital outlay is gonna result in people expecting more ticketing and parking enforcement, I just have the same number of people with the same number of issues, which right now, we don't have anybody who's simply assigned to do parking enforcement. So we've got that kind of that issue of when there's time and people are able to do it, they do it. If there isn't, they don't. So we want to kind of think about the resource on the staff side. The other, and I don't know if council will come at this the same way I do, but it's kind of like when Dan started talking about Bangor's contract, because that's something we could likely piggyback with and share some of the costs associated with that. That contract is based on revenue. So what you end up with is, instead of it being somebody in the business community has called a couple, has called and said, it's just not turning over. I really want it to turn over. And we say, okay, you're Officer X, you're gonna go do parking enforcement this morning and this afternoon. You end up instead with somebody who is making their living based on how many fees they can charge somebody else. And at this point in time, we work very hard in Orono not to make our money based on fees we charge someone. So I'm a little bit concerned kind of about that element. We also have the element where currently all parking is free of charge. We've talked about meters, we've talked about kiosks in the past, hasn't really gone anywhere because that idea of not wanting to make it more difficult for people to come into the community when if you can eat, do you eat here? Do you eat in Bangor? Do you eat in Old Town? All of those things kind of come into play. And our arguments in the past have been the more low key we can keep it and low barrier, the better it is for our business community. So all of those things together, this is not as simple as just stop chalking tires. There are lots of elements in it. And the solution, I think, is going to come with pros and cons. So
Easy answer is we're gonna stop chopping tires.
we are trying, yes, we are
We're
not
gonna
doing
stop
that.
chopping
We're not doing that anymore, but what,
Where do we go for? What's the
where do
path
we,
forward?
where do we go?
We have a member of the business community who's been very patient. Audience,
And with this crowded time.
I wonder if you care to comment on this item.
Yeah.
When it comes to the table,
As we get old.
Oh, it's not good. I'm
Sorry, you
surprised.
might have just identifying yourself.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm Bruce Farnsworth, Pat's Pizza downtown. I was very surprised to think that people object to having their tires chalked.
Yeah.
But they haven't objected about having their license plate pictures taken. Because that, to me, is more of an invasion, and they're worried about it being put on some kind of a list. Something. I think if you went to that system, I think it's gonna be another Pandora's box that's gonna get opened. You know what I mean? I mean, the chunk of the tire that wears off in a couple of days, but there's other things.
Physical touching of the car, that's what the court said. They couldn't find the administrative exclusion or any exclusion to the sort of the warrant requirements before the amendment. They said physically putting, chalk to a tire is a search of somebody's car, but they haven't made any ruling that on the photographing or anything like that.
I myself on busy weekends still park up the bank. And believe me, after a weekend like this, that long walk up to the bank is tough.
Can I ask Bruce, what is your kind of perspective on on 2 hour plus parking? Do you, from where you sit, do you find that to be really problematic? Or
I don't. No, I don't. It's very rarely do we have somebody that stays over 2 hours.
We like to get them in, get them out. Of course, as you know, I've been calling about parking for years. Yeah, yeah,
I didn't
Yeah.
give you up. I just said I heard about it.
yeah, oh, yeah, yeah. Anything we can do for more parking is, this isn't a basic form of parking that we do have a. I was shut up one time by one of the council members one time saying, we do not have a parking problem in Warren. We have a perceived parking problem. And it's- they aren't here anymore, but it's all they have to do is come downtown almost any night and we're out of spaces.
Yeah.
We're out of spaces.
So our parking ordinances it's from 9 to 5, that you have 2 hours. I mean, after 5, can you park longer than 2 hours?
No, it's 2 and 3 hours depending on which lot you're in.
Okay.
I'm 4, sorry.
I was gonna say.
Yeah.
Here's what I was flirting.
4 in the Pine Street lot, 2 on Mill Street.
Oh, 4 hours in the Pine Street. Okay, because I was gonna say, I know that I've parked 2 hours
Yeah.
after. After 5. Meeting-10.
Is it standard when one of the circuit courts makes a ruling that the rest of the country follows that ruling?
I would say that for me, for this type of an issue, the court specifically said that this is something that's not a clearly defined like public safety issue. So this is not like a life safety thing. This is something that there are other ways that towns and municipalities can go about this that don't violate the Fourth Amendment. So it would be on them to formulate what that looks like, I think. It's not binding because it's not here in our circuit and the Supreme Court hasn't decided on it. But if somebody were to bring a litigation against the town, I can guarantee you the Sixth Circuit Court would be mentioned. They would cite this case and say, this was already found in another circuit. This was from August 2021. So just over a year ago now, this decision was made. It's a court case that somebody would cite and say, this is what was found there. It's exactly what they're still doing and they haven't changed. So it's one of those things where I think that we need to, in some way, look at what we're doing and try and make it better and make it more current based off some of the court cases over here across the country.
So I think the other piece to that, Tom, is that there are appeals court rulings that go through the process and never get put on law enforcement training listservs. This tells me if it's on a law enforcement training listserv, it's expected that municipalities are gonna learn about it. And it would tell me that somebody brighter than I am in the legal world has likely said this is pretty much a slam dunk case, and which just based on another court case that we currently have pending on a writ at the Supreme Court of the United States. The big piece of that with our immunity is our qualified immunity is, have we had the opportunity to learn not to do it? And this one, it's on our, I mean, it's as soon as Dan walked it over, as soon as Dan read it, we're kind of on the hook to understand it. Now, we could spend a bunch of money trying to figure out with lawyers if we really need to or don't, but this is such a low threshold issue that we could address in other ways.
And
I
it's
agree
very
with you.
important. I came over to Sophie from the liability standpoint and saying, this is very important to us and it's an ordinance that we have in town. We need more feedback as to how we can go about still doing this if it's important to the council.
So it seems to me the options are. We continue to sign. We don't enforce other than if there's a complaint. Or we develop a system like the camera or whatever, that there's a systematic regulation of parking.
Kiosk where
Yeah.
somebody pulls a ticket and
See, but I would go, like, when I go down to Roberta's to get a cup of coffee, I'm not gonna wanna stop and get a ticket and like run in, grab a cup of coffee, run back out. I mean, I'm just, I'm not gonna wanna do it, but I agree with Bruce too, is I would object to taking a picture of my license plate. I don't have my location turned on my phone. I don't like being tracked, and I don't do anything wrong. I just don't like, well, sort of, but I don't like I just don't like that. I feel like that's surveillance, and I wouldn't do that either. A piece of chalk costs like that.
So I would just add to what you
50
said
cents.
and why this is a important piece to the downtown business side, spoke to some other ones, is that 5-minute turnover.
Yeah.
Is incredibly important to the ampersands, the hair places, some of those during the day, especially at night. Most of the time, people aren't in there, but they might go to a restaurant for 2 hours and
Right.
sit there.
That's
The
what I-
turnover and the timing, as Bruce said, there are times that people make all their money. There
Yeah.
are times that they don't, so trying to figure out how to make sure that that's available for people is important to the business.
Yeah.
Businesses down there, because it is very short windows.
Right, exactly. And if we start installing electric car chargers too, I mean, that's gonna take some time. So that's gonna be,
But we-
plug into those kinds of.
But
things.
we've already talked about the fact that those electric car chargers, we would
Yeah.
use the exemption.
Yeah, that's true.
Can I ask, how many can you give a rough average of how many tickets we write in a month?
Since like recently, even honestly since COVID, because people weren't traveling like they were. I don't know off the top of my head, I have to go back to like 2019 data. It's, Sophie and I talked a little bit. Overtime parking enforcement is not a huge moneymaker for the town. We are not writing a lot of tickets. When we were doing it infrequently as it was, even before COVID. 5-6 a week, maybe, and that's if we were having people go down 3-4 times a week, because they're really, like, how we would normally look at it, some of our people is, you go down in the morning, 9 o'clock, say, just choose a time, 9 o'clock, and then you come back at 2-3 o'clock. You give them more than 2 hours. It's not 2 hours and 1 minute, because they're not looking at their clock saying, hey, 2 hours and 1 minute, I gotta go back and get those tires. So try and do it 2 or 3 times in a 10-hour shift, a day shift or something like that. But it's not a huge thing. We write more tickets for parking out of stalls, handicap parking, driver's side of curb, winter parking ban. We make far more tickets for that than we do.
So to give you a sense, last year, we had about $40,000 of parking funds issued. The vast majority of those are ones that we pay more attention to because they're about safety. Handicap parking, it's not safe for somebody who can't get to where they need to go. Parking outside the lines can create safety issues with people trying to jam their cars in. Parking on the wrong side of the street, things that impact our operations, like parking during a snowstorm and parking overnight. Those types of things are where we really, when we talk about parking enforcement, we really go there. Then when we get calls, which I will admit, Bruce is not the one that usually, I'd like to pick on, but he's not the one that calls. It's usually because there is something very specific happening for a long time that people are asking us to make a point with. And we use the systematic approach to make that point, but I don't think that that's out of our hands now. We got a call and we went down and we could pull it, do what we normally do and go back in 2 hours, and if they're still there, take it up at that point.
I'd say personally, I'm in favor of the honor system but also getting business input because they're the ones that are kind of living with this, but personally, I think honor system. I don't like being the town, it bothers me when people come home for homecoming and they're parking up on the street or whatever, and they're come home for homecoming, get tickets, go, thanks for coming, see ya. I get you're doing your job, I understand, but
Well, every study that's ever been done for the past 30 years, the town has spent a lot of money on. The very first agenda on top of their thing is that before you do any of these changes, the town needs more parking. I mean, I'm almost to the end of my stretch, so.
I'm gonna have to get you back over there. Is that what you said?
It might, yeah. But, there's 2 or 3 things that I'm, I'd love to see more back. It would benefit everybody and it would eliminate this problem. It would eliminate some of the, overnight parking and the snow removal problems. And the other problem with is that if somebody is, we have a lot of drinking establishments downtown. And I truly say, I'm not one of them. But if somebody is intoxicated, there is not one place downtown they can leave their car without getting a ticket. There's no provisions for that. And I know they have the bus go round and round, but that has helped. I gotta admit that. But there is still that person that is gonna get overserved and take a chance on driving home because they can't leave the car.
Yeah, I do share the concern about the incentivizing drunk driving. That is happening with our current parking situation. As far as this issue here, pending some, real special input from businesses. I'm a similar mind to Leo, just sort of light touch here.
Yeah. So hearing what I'm hearing, I think what my direction is to go ahead with the setting up a meeting as I've already talked with Mitch and Dan about doing to talk to the business community. But barring major feedback to just continue doing what we're doing. If we get a lot of complaints, then we'll bring it back and suggest that we need to do something.
Makes sense.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Farnsworth.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, it's just where I want to spend my day. Oh, I don't know whether you've heard enough, they've axed the main day at the university.
Really?
Wow.
Yes.
I heard that. Oh,
You heard that?
do you know for sure it's happened?
Well, the source that I had was pretty good. I can't feel it. It was pretty good.
I think we all have some of those.
Yeah.
I'm just waiting to see when it's.
And
official.
they stated that they had to hire so many people to, so many police officers and stuff. Up there, that it just created more problems between all those big housing developments.
Yeah, the beans spilled. Right there.
Yeah.
Spilled the beans, please.
Yeah. Sorry.
College students are.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, we'll move on.
Actually, I would suggest, Tom, given the hour.
Yeah.
That if we could move on to the manager's report. And because I do need.
Excellent idea.
This poor ordinance amendment.
Excellent
It just
idea.
can't find its home.
I think it's gonna be first on the agenda next time.
Yeah. So by way of managers, the town manager's report, we finished the audit, in record time. We have gotten draft financials. I would expect that in November, early November, I will have formal audit books for you guys to review. If you do not care about getting a hard copy audit book, please let me know. We do pay for them. So if I can let Casey know I need fewer, it costs us less money. If you want a hard copy because it's easier for you to read, then I definitely want to buy it for you. But if you're gonna scan it and toss it to the side, well, let's not fall in the ground.
How much are they per
Pages, no, how many pages?
56. And they're numbers, which
Right.
I think for a lot of people that can be difficult. But I also know in the past, we've had a couple counselors who pretty formally said, I'll wait for your summary and.
But we have a PDF version though.
Yes,
Yeah.
electronic version.
Right.
How much does it cost to get the print version? Do you remember?
I don't, 253, it's not like $15, but it's money that when I then see them kind of tossed on the side and I'm pulling them apart to recycle them, I'm kind of like, why?
Yeah, that makes sense.
So just let me know.
Great.
But the audit does look good, and I just, normally I would give a lot of tipping of the hand. because we're still in draft form, but after what we have seen in the paper about other communities, not going from a lot of money in the bank to $199,000 in the bank with $1.3 million of debt. I just want to very quickly let people know that we added to the bottom line this year. Our fund balance is up. Some of that has to do with restricted funds because we're bringing in lots of grant money. But we also brought in a lot more revenue sharing than we had anticipated. So we look pretty good, and I think we want to kind of go through that. More, even better, the auditors were here for 4 days and turned around the draft financial statements. I had them on Friday, which is unheard of. So really pleased with Zach, Bob, and the team with that. It has been a busy week. Last weekend, Megan was kind and represented council at a groundbreaking of the hotels on campus. Did an amazing
I
job.
wear a fancy hat.
Yes.
And fling dirt around with a shovel.
I still
I built a hotel, is what I'm saying. So you're welcome.
Don't mean to brag.
Yep. She did a great job. In 2 weeks, Tom is going to represent council at a groundbreaking or unveiling of the statue, which is out in Webster Park. Now, for both people who might not recall, this is the statue that when we asked council's permission to put the base in before you accepted it, it suddenly turned into everything from a bar to, whatever. It is, it's out, it looks pretty cool. It's granite and copper, I think. What? Bronze, like. We're gonna get a demonstration on how to use it, and Tom is gonna welcome folks, which will be cool.
When is that? When is that?
21st.
Well, you'll all get an invite.
Okay.
But will you have a hard hat for him? Because
No, I'm
that's-
sorry.
That's a key element.
You want one?
If Tom wants to tell him where to hard that, we would find him. So I am, working through, we have Hamden Electric trying to address the lights on the bridge. We've had to reach out to the state for some help, but we are making progress, which is a step up from where we were. We have folks on Forest Avenue who have contacted us about speeding on Forest. It is, I am sure, really difficult for them to deal with the speeders that they are seeing. We have instituted some significant increase in dedicated speed details on Forest, College, and Park because of concerns that people have raised. Rob is working with the state to try to figure out what infrastructure improvements we can make there. Speed bumps are no longer allowed on roads, so you can do speed tables in certain circumstances. It's important for people to understand that we don't control the signage or the permanent signage or the roadways on Route 2, Forest Ave, College Ave, Park Street. Benefit. I am really pleased to report that our construction projects are beginning to wrap up. We are going to see final pavement on Chapel, College Heights and Chapel. And we will start to see the Mahaney development button up. So the plan, according to Rob, is that we will have Mahaney done in time to close the loan before this period expires, which was a little bit of a concern for us. The new loader is in. I got to go see it and climb on it and climb over. I mean, the tires are as tall as I am, but so it was really good to see. we continue to kind of march through the process. We've got the environmental fair, which is coming up in a couple weeks. I really hope that counselors will at least make an appearance and let Cheryl know if you want to volunteer, because she and Megan are planning to volunteer duties as we speak. Window dressers is gonna be the week following next week, right?
The 15th, yeah, it starts on the 15th.
And that's one, if you'd like to volunteer, you should definitely see Cheryl for
Yes,
that.
or Megan, I think Megan's.
Megan's got that.
Yeah.
So if you really want to volunteer, so you don't have to look for people, just let me know and I'll make sure you get on the list. A lot of stuff has been happening. Good stuff, I think, by and large. I'm gonna stop there because I could just ramble for quite a while. What I do need from counselors is just some quick information about, I've got the draft council and council committee meeting schedule, and I want to talk about a couple of dates to see whether or not you want to meet. So I've gone through and I've taken every Monday, taken meetings out that are town holidays or that are on our holidays of importance, dates of importance. Thank you. You can. And the ones that come up for me are the 31st, like on Halloween, are people going to show up here for a council committee meeting? And if the answer is yes, great. And if the answer is no, I might as well plan not to have.
Are we showing costume?
I actually have a religious holiday that day, so we'll personally miss that meeting.
Okay. The other thing that we have happening at just about the same time is trunk or treat downtown, so there is a town that's happening. So people okay with me eliminating the 31st?
Yes, my 8-year-old would thank you.
Okay.
The
The other one that came up for me was Monday, November 21st. That is the Monday of Thanksgiving week. Are people okay with meeting that day? Yes, okay. December 19th, are we getting too close to? Yeah, you tell me. And the first day of
I'll
Hanukkah
be
is
around.
the 18th. So we're good with that day? Okay. The 22nd for Environment Committee,
We switched to Wednesdays, so,
I can't keep up with you, Cheryl.
well, this is the last time. We're not switching again.
Okay, so you'd be looking,
It would be the same day as the planning board meeting, but we'd be out by 6:30.
so Wednesday, you want me to, I'll save that?
Yeah.
So the other dates, there are two, the fire department community conversation, I have in person and virtual. It's only gonna happen once because we have figured out how to have these meetings hybrid, in meeting format, and we can do it until somebody Zoom bombs us when we'll have to say we can't do it anymore. But, it will either be the 8th or the 15th, this of December. It's on your sheet. I'll have to talk to Chief which day works better. Probably the 8th to keep it as far away from the kind of year-end stuff that's happening. That fire department meeting is gonna be a strategic planning session. It's part of, if we were going to do accreditation, the first step in that. We're also using it as a kickoff for departmental topic focused, not department focused, meetings in, we'll kick off for January, February, March, and April, where we'll talk, in January with the police department, so the idea is the department will come in, give a presentation about what they do, the things that are kind of facing them, take a question and answer period, which we are finding people kind of are enjoying that. And then moving into what are, we told you what we do, we've given you an opportunity to ask questions and answer them. Now, are there things that you are concerned about that we can talk about that maybe didn't come up in the question and answer period? We do police in January, in February, community services, which would be the library, parks and rec, community development type work. In March, we would do public works, public infrastructure would be, public works and soup and, WPCF kind of together. And then in March, we would wrap it up with, instead of talking about, talk about finance and administration, and we thought it would be a lot better to talk about customer service and communication, because so much of what would come out of those other things would be around customer service. The plan is that will all wrap into priorities and perspectives that will take into the budget period. We're thinking that we need to advertise these much differently because they have we have had really poor attendance. Let me take that back. The people who have shown up have been an absolute delight and totally worth the time to have the conversations with them. But when I think about having 8 department heads to chat with 5 people, 8 people, 1 person, it probably is, I mean, it would be almost better for me to have a conversation with the town manager. Let me take all your questions and I can get them to the right place. So we're gonna kind of rethink this and think we can do it a different way. On October 17th, back to the schedule, we're gonna try to abbreviate the council meeting as much as we can, and then hold a workshop after. That is gonna be the check-in with the building, the community facilities assessment team. We have the consultant that's gonna come share with you kind of what they're hearing. They've had stakeholder meetings. It's a final opportunity for input, feeling like counselors might have a different perspective than rank and file citizens about future needs of the community. So I am gonna try really hard not to let that last a long time. But I will have snacks because when I back 2 meetings like that up. That, although it's a workshop, we would plan to stream it and have it a hybrid format.
What was the date?
The 17th of October.
Was there a lot of turnout on?
So we had a little snafu with the link. We got it solved. I did not hear a hue and cry that people tried to get on. We had one individual who was really gracious to have a one-on the entire staff conversation. He was great. John was amazing with his 2 kids. And we had 2 other people that were there, but even after questions and prompting, they really wanted to stay in the background. And I think that's one of the things to think about with a hybrid meeting is when you think about when it's appropriate or not for those meetings. One of the things I did notice is when we only had 8 people show up to the in-person meeting, which you were at, Cheryl, we pivoted and made it work and had a wonderful experience for 60 minutes. John was incredibly kind. We really put him on the spot, and I don't know that that's something that I would feel comfortable doing too much more. So we have to kind of think about how what the venues are. But we're getting there.
Anything else?
I have one more question for you. Have you heard anything about the, I'm gonna say LD 290, I'm thinking that's the one. The, over 65 property tax,
Anything like what?
like, have we had more applications?
So
I know that it's gonna come up again and possibly in some kind of appeal form. So, or repeal.
So we have, and I haven't looked in the last week, but we
Right.
had about 140 applications.
Okay.
I have just earlier today, I okayed postcard that is gonna go out in the next week or so to every current resident, so every household will get one. That is just, did you know?
Right,
Reminding people that they have till December 1st to sign up. I think it would be really important for people to sign up and get in on this if they can, because I don't know what it's gonna look like next year. And I
right.
do know that it's hard to take away a benefit, but easy to say, okay, we're not giving it to them.
I think that it's gonna be a conversation in the legislature this year again, so. A more robust conversation about what that means for municipalities.
So,
Just curious how Orono sits in that.
so I will tell you, Orono sits as a potential, this could potentially make a really big impact, because when you look at our demographics,
Right.
we skew very heavily in the 18 to 24 demographic. We skew very heavily in the over 60 demographic. And we also are a place that people like to retire to. So when you consider that, we're seeing significant number of people who have not lived only in Orono. And when you consider that if somebody was in Lakeview Plantation with a mill rate of 2 and an average house cost of $200,000, and they came and bought an average house in Orono with an average tax bill of $5,000. That's a really big delta, and they freeze it at what they got in the last community. So, but on the other hand, as much as, you know, I think about my experience working with the legislature, which I've not been, you know, intimately involved, but I've been on the periphery for better part of 2 decades. It is really hard for elected officials to take something that sounds like a great idea. And even if it's got bad policy behind it, take it away. And I don't think that Orono should put their eggs in the basket of, the legislature's gonna fix this and ensure that we don't lose money. I don't see that.
Yeah.
Wouldn't be unlikely to unfund it.
That would be
They're not gonna take
very
it away.
likely to unfund it.
And I think that that's gonna be a conversation, so, yeah.
And I think it really depends on which party has power as we move forward.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where I am. And the last thing I would just say is council has been quite quiet over the last several weeks, and I don't know if it's in deference to thinking that I am super, super busy, but if people have issues that they want to discuss, that is why I am here, and I cannot prepare things to meet your needs if I don't know what those needs are.
Okay.
You can't read minds.
I can't unless I check.
Geez, so
That's why I text you.
Are we ready to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
All right, motion is seconded and all in favor.
Thank you all very much.
Yeah, thank
Give it
you.
us, we're gonna get out.